For years, I felt uncomfortable relying on someone else financially. Even when there was partnership, even when there was support, something inside me kept saying that wasn't security. It was an illusion. But at the same time, I had no idea where to start. I felt lost, overwhelmed with information, consuming mindlessly, accumulating stuff and expenses that led nowhere. It was in that cycle that I started noticing a pattern. Women who are truly financially free don't live in excess. They live with intention. They follow a minimalist logic, not of restriction, but of clarity. They know what comes in, what goes out, and most importantly, why. And by applying this minimalist financial mindset, I started building my own freedom. Today, I don't rely on anyone because I learned to rely on myself with structure, not with pressure. If this resonates with you, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and come discover the 11 minimalist financial habits that sustain true independence. Habit 1. They know exactly how much their lifestyle costs. For a long time, I avoided looking at my numbers. I had a rough idea of how much I earned, but no clue how much I spent. I lived in a constant sense of scarcity, even when money was coming in. It was like driving a car with no dashboard. I had no idea when I was nearing the limit. That's when I realized one of the most powerful habits of wealthy women who live with ease. They know exactly how much the life they chose to live costs. No drama, no judgment. Just clarity. They know their fixed costs, variable costs, and hidden ones too. And most importantly, they know if those costs align with the life they actually want. When I started applying this, everything changed. I opened a spreadsheet, listed every expense, even the tiny ones, looked at everything with maturity, and realized a lot of what I was keeping no longer made sense. That awareness set me free, not to spend less, but to spend better, to align my lifestyle with my values, and to know, with precision, how much money I actually needed to live peacefully, without fake leftovers or chronic shortages. Today I know how much my peace costs, and that's worth more than any status. Comment: I know how much the life I chose costs, if you've also decided to take control and stop living in the dark. Habit 2. They live below their means, even when they could afford more. For a long time, every time my income increased, my spending followed. It was automatic. More money in, more money out. I'd allow myself more luxuries, more gifts, more "I deserve it." But the truth is, I wasn't living better, just fuller, and more vulnerable too. By paying close attention to financially solid women, I noticed the pattern. They live below their means, by choice, not by necessity. Even when they could splurge, they stick with what's enough. Because they understand that financial freedom isn't about how much comes in, but how much consistently stays. Adopting this habit challenged me at first. Not because I wanted to show off, but because I was afraid of seeming cheap, afraid of missing out, afraid of loss. But what I gained was much bigger. I gained peace. I gained savings. I gained autonomy. Today, I know I can afford more, but I don't need to prove anything to anyone. My lifestyle serves my freedom, not my ego. And that changes everything. Comment: I live below my means by choice, not by lack. If you've also decided to create surplus, not to impress, but to protect yourself. Habit 3. They separate wants from needs with honesty. There was a time in my life when everything became a need. A new outfit for an event, dinner to unwind, a course I might never use. I justified all my desires as urgencies. And that drained my bank account, my energy, and my clarity. It wasn't until I started observing closely the behavior of women who are truly financially free that I noticed. They have a sharp internal filter. They know how to tell the difference between a fleeting desire and a real need. And they do it with honesty. Not rigidity, but awareness. Adopting this habit was a re-education. Every time I felt like buying something, I asked myself, do I really need this? Or is it just an impulse? Does this expense bring me closer to the life I want or just ease temporary tension? And over time, my consumption got lighter, cleaner, more aligned with what actually matters. Today, I treat myself, but I don't live chasing quick fixes, because I've learned that the void we try to fill with spending is never satisfied, only postponed. Financial awareness is emotional too. Comment: I separate wants from needs with clarity. If you've also realized that maturity starts with the small choices. Habit 4. They know exactly where every penny is going. I used to think that tracking every expense was something only control freaks did. As long as I wasn't in the red, I figured everything was fine. But at the end of each month, the feeling was always the same. Where did all my money go? It wasn't until I stopped romanticizing my freedom and started taking responsibility that I understood. Financially solid women know exactly where every penny is going. Not because they're controlling, but because they're conscious. They track their spending like someone who's taking care of something valuable. They know money needs direction. And if they don't give it one, impulse will. Adopting this habit took humility. I sat down calmly, opened my accounts, looked at my statements with no filter. And I started logging everything. Not to trap myself, but to set myself free. Soon enough, patterns emerged. Unnecessary expenses, recurring leaks, little things that added up to big amounts. And more importantly, I started making decisions based on data, not feelings. Today, my money doesn't disappear. It has an owner, a purpose, a path. Comment, my money has direction and purpose. If you've also decided to stop pretending you're in control and start truly leading. Habit 5. They automate what matters so they don't rely on willpower. For a long time, I believed discipline meant constant effort. I'd try to remember to save money, to pay bills on time, to set aside something to invest. But between the rush, exhaustion, and unexpected things, what mattered most always got pushed back. And later, almost always turned into never. It was only when I started studying the behavior of women who maintain their independence consistently that I understood. They automate the essentials. Not because they're cold, but because they know relying on motivation alone is the quickest way to get stuck. They create simple systems, automatic payments, scheduled transfers to investments, bill reminders, budgeting across specific accounts. Adopting this took a weight off my shoulders. I stopped wasting mental energy trying to remember everything and started using that energy to create, decide, and grow. Today, my savings build themselves. My obligations stay in check effortlessly, and my money works for me because I stopped counting on willpower alone. Comment, I create systems that work for me. If you've also realized that freedom comes from structure, not from impulse. Habit 6. They treat emergency savings as a foundation, not a far-off goal. For a long time, I treated emergency savings as optional. Important? Yes, but always pushed for later. Always saved for when there's extra. And guess what? There never was. There was always a new priority, an unexpected expense, or an urge that felt urgent. It was only when I started paying attention to the habits of truly free women that I understood. Emergency savings aren't a luxury. They're the foundation. They're the bare minimum. They don't negotiate that. They don't count on luck or anyone else. They build a real cushion, one that supports their steps, sustains their breaks, and protects their peace of mind. I decided to do the same. I started small, setting aside a fixed amount each week, like it was a bill to pay. I made it a priority, not a bonus. And when the first unexpected event came, I was ready. I paid it calmly. No debt, no panic, no relying on anyone. Today, my emergency fund gives me something money can't buy: peace, and the freedom to choose. Comment, my emergency fund is my foundation. If you've also chosen to stop counting on luck and started building real security. Habit 7. They protect themselves from emotional debt disguised as urgency. For a long time, I took on debt that wasn't even mine. Loans out of pity, gifts beyond what I could afford, trips on credit just to not feel left out. It was like I was constantly trying to prove something, or shield myself from judgment. And the worst part, I did it all with a smile, as if it were generosity. But inside, I was drowning in guilt and resentment. It was in that cycle that I noticed something common among financially free women. They don't fall into emotional debt. They know how to say no. They don't buy approval. They don't go into debt to maintain relationships or uphold standards that don't reflect who they really are. Realizing this was painful. I had to admit how many times I'd compromised myself financially out of fear of disappointing others. But that truth was the turning point for change. Today, every cent I spend has a real purpose. I don't spend to be accepted. I don't feel guilty for not being able to do everything. And I've learned that real love never demands financial sacrifice as proof. Comment, emotional debt has no place in my life if you've also realized that freedom requires firm choices, not disguised concessions. Habit 8. They set simple, clear financial goals with deadlines. For a long time, my financial goals were vague. I want to save money. I want to invest more. I want to earn better. But none of that truly moved me because it lacked one key thing: clarity. Without an exact amount, deadline, or real purpose, my goals became mere wishes, and wishes alone don't drive action. Watching the behavior of women who are financially independent, I learned they treat money like a project. They know how much they want, what it's for, and by when. And they have a simple plan. Nothing fancy, just extremely practical. When I started applying this habit, I stopped feeling lost. I wrote down specific goals. how much I wanted to save in the next 3 months, how much I needed for a particular investment, what extra income I generate weekly. Suddenly, everything became more tangible. Procrastination gave way to focus, and small wins started to motivate me more than any financial theory. Today, every goal I set has a number, a reason, and a deadline. And that takes money out of the anxiety zone and into the direction zone. Comment: my goals have a number, a reason, and a deadline. If you've also realized that financial clarity is what turns intention into results. Habit 9. They build multiple income streams without losing focus. For a long time, I kept hearing that I needed multiple income streams. And honestly, I jumped into everything that came my way. Selling something here, taking a course there, freelancing all over the place. At first, it felt like productivity, but in reality, it was just distraction. Lots of effort, little return, and a mind completely drained. It was through studying women who have actually built financial freedom that I understood. Yes, they do have multiple income streams, but none of them happen by chance. They choose intentionally. They build a solid foundation first, and only then do they expand. They don't chase everything, they build with strategy. When I applied this habit, everything changed. I picked one main source, focused on structuring it, strengthening it, scaling it. And only when it consistently held its own did I start adding new income streams, calmly, with vision and synergy. Today, I'm not dependent on just one source, but I'm also not scattered across 10 things with no direction. My income is diversified, but my focus is steady, and that's why it grows with consistency, not by luck. Comment: I diversify with direction. If you've also realized that multiple incomes only work when you have a strong foundation and real focus. Habit 10. They educate themselves financially all the time. I used to think financial education was something you learned once. Read a book, watched a video, took a course. Done, now I know. But in reality, every time life changed, my behavior with money would regress. Because I wasn't keeping myself updated. And without updates, there's no sustainability. It was only by surrounding myself with truly independent women that I realized they treat financial education as an ongoing practice. They learn, apply, adjust, and go back to learning. They know there's no such thing as stability without maintenance. I started with the basics, set aside some time each week to learn, even if it was just a short article, a quick video, or a conversation. Little by little, I began expanding my perspective. I uncovered mistakes I didn't even know I was making, and I started making much more informed decisions. Today, I don't go a month without reading something about finance. I reassess my investments. I analyze my behavior, and that keeps me present, clear-headed, and confident. The woman I'm becoming doesn't rely on luck. She builds. And to build, she knows she has to keep learning. Comment: my independence grows with my knowledge. If you've also realized that freedom requires learning, continuous, real, and practical. Habit 11. They maintain a respectful relationship with money, not one of fear or excitement. For many years, my relationship with money was overly emotional. When it was scarce, I felt fear, shame, insecurity. When it was abundant, I spent quickly, like I had to prove I deserved it. Living like that, my bank account was a mirror of my inner imbalance. It was only when I began observing with humility and care the patterns of women who never had to depend on anyone again that I noticed. They treat money with respect. They don't put it on a pedestal, nor do they see it as an enemy. They're not afraid to lose it, nor euphoric when they gain it. They have awareness. They have maturity. That's when I started redefining everything. Instead of avoiding my statements, I reviewed them calmly. Instead of spending impulsively, I paused to think. Instead of measuring my worth by my balance, I started measuring it by my ability to care, to build, to sustain. Today, money doesn't dictate how I feel, and it doesn't validate me. It's just a tool. Important, yes, but never bigger than me. Comment: I relate to money with maturity. If you've also realized that independence begins when money stops being drama and becomes direction. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that financial independence isn't about luck, inheritance, or genius. It's about behavior, about small decisions that, repeated with intention, change everything. These 11 habits aren't strict rules or magic formulas. They're real practices, upheld by ordinary women who chose to live with structure. And precisely because of that, they never had to depend on anyone again. You don't need to apply everything at once, but you do need to decide where you'll start. And more importantly, commit to that decision until it becomes part of who you are. The woman who builds freedom doesn't make noise. She makes choices. Clear, consistent, and intentional. Comment. I practice these habits for freedom if you've also chosen to break out of autopilot and create your own security. And of course, if this content resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another woman who's also ready to rely solely on herself.